Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Jaya Gopi Jana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Nitai Gaura Hari Bo. Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. Good morning. Welcome. Just a week and a half left, kind of the semester, so I hope you're all doing well. It's the final push. It's always nice to really put your foot on the gas during the final little push, so I'm sure we're going to have a really nice 2 weeks. Okay, so let's start with the invocation. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Okay, let's do the 2 verses together.
Nayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Yasim Tato Dayamudirayat Nasta Praye Sabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Utamashloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki.
Okay. So, in the most recent class, we were hearing about the Viratrupa. Shukadeva Goswami is currently describing this universal form of the Lord. And today we'll see he's going to start speaking about the Supersoul in the heart. So let's just read the verses. So starting with 2 to 8 and then all the way to 21. So maybe Nate or Shruti can take it away. Okay.
Others conceive the personality of Godhead residing within the body in the region of the heart and measuring only 8 inches, with 4 hands carrying a lotus, a wheel of a chariot, and a conch shell, and a club, respectively.
His mouth expresses his happiness, his eyes spread like the petals of a lotus, and his garments, yellowish like the saffron of a kadamba flower, are bedecked with valuable jewels. His ornaments are all made of gold, set with jewels, and he wears a glowing headdress and earrings.
His lotus feet are placed over the whorls of the lotus-like hearts of great mystics. On his chest is a Kaustuba jewel engraved with a beautiful calf, and there are other jewels on his shoulders. His complete torso is garlanded with fresh flowers.
His lotus feet are he is well decorated with an ornamental wreath about his waist and rings studded with valuable jewels on his fingers. His leglets, his bangles, his oiled hair, curling with a bluish tint, and his beautiful smiling face are all very pleasing.
By the way, any of you who have a good angle, it's basically depicted there at the back, right? What we're reading right now. Just so you know. Jonathan pointed it out to me. Okay.
The Lord's magnanimous pastimes and the glowing glancing of his smiling face are all indications of his extensive benedictions. One must therefore concentrate on this transcendental form of the Lord as long as the mind can be fixed on him by meditation.
The process of meditation should begin from the lotus feet of the Lord and progress to his smiling face. The meditation The process of meditation should begin from the lotus feet of the Lord and progress to his smiling face. The meditation should be concentrated upon the lotus feet, then the calves, then the thighs, and in this way higher and higher. The more the mind becomes fixed upon the different parts of the limbs, one after another, the more the intelligence becomes purified.
Unless a gross materialist develops a sense of loving service unto the Supreme Lord, the seer of both the transcendental and material worlds, he should remember or meditate upon the universal form of the Lord at the end of his prescribed duties.
O King, whenever the yogi desires to leave this planet of human beings, he should not be perplexed about the proper time or place, but should comfortably sit without being disturbed, and regulating the life air should control the senses by the mind.
Thereafter, the yogi should merge his mind by his unalloyed intelligence into the living entity, and then merge the living entity into the superself. And by doing this, the fully satisfied living entity becomes situated in the supreme stage of satisfaction, so that he ceases from all other activities.
In that transcendental state of Labdoparshanti, there is no supremacy of devastating time, which controls even the celestial demigods who are empowered to rule over mundane creatures. And what to speak of the demigods themselves? Nor is there the mode of material goodness, nor passion, nor ignorance, nor even the false ego, nor the material causal ocean, nor the material nature.
Transcendentalists desire to avoid everything godless, for they know that supreme situation in which everything is related with the Supreme Lord Vishnu. Therefore, a pure devotee who is in absolute harmony with the Lord does not create perplexities, but worships the lotus feet of the Lord at every moment, taking them into his heart.
By the strength of scientific knowledge, one should be well situated in absolute realization, and thus be able to extinguish all material desires. One should then give up the material body by blocking the air hole through which stool is evacuated, with the heel of one's foot, and by lifting the life air from one place to another in the 6 primary places.
The meditative devotee should slowly push up the life air from the navel to the heart, from there to the chest, and from there to the root of the palate. You should search out the proper places with intelligence.
Last one.
Thereafter, the bhakti yogi should push the life air up between the eyebrows, and then, blocking the 7 outlets of the life air, he should maintain his aim for going back home, back to Godhead. If he's completely free from all desires for material enjoyment, he should then reach the cerebral hole and give up his material connections, having gone to the Supreme.
Okay. Max, I'm going to meet you later. We're going to do this, right? So what is going on? I'm going to ask the audience. We'll start, and I want to actually hear some answers. Why in the world is Shukadev Goswami first? Before this, he was speaking about the Virat Rupa. Now he's describing how to see the Supersoul in the heart and these meditative processes, the life air. I mean, he's speaking the Srimad Bhagavatam, which culminates in the 10th canto in Krishna's pastimes. The Bhagavatam is about Krishna consciousness. What is going on here? Why are we hearing these different descriptions, Jonathan?
Maybe he's given us the oldest guided meditation in the history of the world.
Okay, I like that answer. That's very nice. Beautiful. Christina, and then Max after that.
I think he's giving us all like the lesser, not as great alternatives before coming to like the really good stuff.
Ooh, okay. That's also a very good point. Yes. Max, and then Rasika.
I was thinking that is because since it wasn't just him and Maharaj Parikshit, there's a whole assembly of sages there that maybe not all of them were ready to hear the nectar of it, but if they could do it through some other means, like this process right here, controlling the life air, then everyone could benefit, even if they're not on the highest platform.
You guys are geniuses. This is literally, so far, everything I've written down. Rasika.
So this is also Shukadev Goswami describing a hierarchy of processes that would eventually lead to the simplicity of chanting the holy names. But in other yugas, the yuga dharma was not exactly the same. So, in Satya Yuga, they would practice mystic yoga like this, but it would be their expression of bhakti. And Dwapara Yuga, Treta Yuga, of course, was sacrifice. Dwapara Yuga was extremely opulent deity worship. And now, of course, Kali Yuga. All of those things that are described are automatically achieved just by the simplicity of focusing on the holy name and pastimes of the Lord.
Right. Thank you. These are literally every single thing I've written down. Gopi. Do we have a mic close by?
Yeah, it's described in the first canto. He's going through this Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan. Brahman is the impersonal realization. Paramatma is the super soul, and Bhagavan is the supreme personality of Godhead. It's described as like the sun rays are Brahman, the sun surface is Paramatma, and when you enter into the sun glow, that's Bhagavan. So one who achieves Bhagavan he already knows the first two.
Right.
But if you're stuck on the first two, then you're in the preliminary stages.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. That was really good responses. So everything you said, I'll also touch upon briefly. But I also want to contextualize things again even more. So we're going to look at some of the verses that have appeared over the last week or two. I don't know if you have them ready, Nitai. So we'll start with 1:19:24. So this, maybe I can just read them. So this is kind of, in one sense, where it all begins, the discussions. This is before Shukadeva Goswami appeared, if I'm not mistaken. So now Parikshit Maharaj is asking all the assembled sages there, "O trustworthy Brahmanas, I now ask you about my immediate duty." So there's some real urgency, my immediate duty. Please, after proper deliberation, tell me of the unalloyed duty of everyone in all circumstances, and especially of those who are just about to die. And then 1937, he asks it again, but now it's directly addressed at Shukadeva Goswami. He says, "You are the spiritual master of great saints and devotees. I am therefore begging you to show the way of perfection for all persons, and especially for one who is about to die." Okay? So this, even what we're doing today, we're hearing about the Supersoul, it's all just Shukadev answering these questions of Parikshit Maharaj, right? What's the highest duty? I'm about to die. There's a snake bird coming. You know, I have 7 days left. Shukadev gives answers. So in 2:1:6, okay, he says there, he gives the answer. The highest perfection of human life, achieved either by complete knowledge of matter and spirit, by practice of mystic powers, or by perfect discharge of occupational duty, is to remember the personality of Godhead at the end of life. Very straightforward. And then again, in 2:1:11, Shukadev keeps answering. He elaborates. He says, sorry, I'm rapid firing it. He says, "O king, constant chanting of the holy name of the Lord after the ways of the great authorities is the doubtless and fearless way of success for all, including those who are free from all material desires, those who are desirous of all material enjoyment, and also those who are self-satisfied by dint of transcendental knowledge." So we have these two answers close to each other. Remembering the personality of Godhead, remembering Krishna at the end of life, and then constant chanting of the holy name. So you shouldn't have any doubts that what we're doing here every morning in the temple room is not the right thing. You know, why is Shukadev speaking about universal form? Should we all go to Payne's Prairie and just look at the trees as the hair of the Supreme Lord? Why are we chanting? No, Shukadev is clearly saying, this is his answer. But then something happens which makes him then speak about these other processes. Parikshit actually asked another question. So this is 2:1:22. He asks the question and he uses the Sanskrit word dharana, which means to fix the mind with intelligence on the Lord's form. So if you want to remember Krishna, and what chanting of the holy name ultimately brings us to is to be able to fix the mind on the Lord's form, and even then after that is pastimes, and you know, it's a complete absorption. So dharana, fixing the mind on with intelligence on the Lord's form. So let's see what he asked here in 22. He said, he was inquiring further, and he said, "O Brahmana, please describe in full detail how and where the mind has to be applied, and how the conception can be fixed, so that the dirty things in a person's mind can be removed." So what he's implying is, you know, maybe some people have too much dirt. So what happens then? And that's when Shukadev Goswami starts speaking about Virat Rupa and so forth. I don't know if any of you remember, but in Kalakanta Prabhu's class recently, in the purport, we did this verse in the purport, and it said there, it makes reference to the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says, "Fools deride me when I come in this form." So some people say, who is this Krishna? Some people are averse, they have an aversion to a personal conception of God. So that's why these other things are then described. So the reasons for speaking about Virat Rupa and Paramatma, all of you really answered it already. Answering Parikshit Maharaj's question, basically, about the dharana, how can the mind be really fixed? As Max said, addressing some of the sages' opinions. Max must be an acharya, because our acharyas have explained that, remember, there was a big assembly. Some of the sages sitting there might have different opinions. So Shukadev is keeping them in mind, and he's giving these different ideas. Okay? Then, there's a path for everyone. So even those who deride Krishna, they can just start meditating on the Virat Rupa. And then, as Christina so beautifully pointed out, Shukadev Goswami is actually, he's comparing everything, because it's really when you put something up against something else that its beauty can even be expanded. So Shukadev again and again speaks about how bhakti is, and sadhana with a mood of bhakti is the highest path, the best path for someone about to die. He's comparing it, right? And then, as Rasika Prabhu and I think someone else said, maybe Gopal Prabhu, there's a gradual progression. That's another reason. So now on this last point, we're going to dive into the purport. On this point of gradual progression, we'll see that Prabhupada is speaking about that. So let's do the Sanskrit first. We're going back to verse 13. Did we lose power or something? Oh, no. So it's going to be, is it 2:13? I did not look at the Sanskrit before, so I'm not sure which meter we should be covering. Anyone have any ideas? Does someone want to give an example and actually chant it?
Tadadiyavadasitam gadabrata Jitam jitam stanam apoya dharayet Param param sudyati yatha yatha.
Okay, let's hear from the girls. Anyone?
Eka eka shonyanyanubhavayet Vatadiyavadashitam gadavrita Jitam jitam stanam apoya dharayet Param param sudyati dhira yatha yatha.
Okay, let's go straight to the translation. Let's read that again. Okay. So the process of meditation should begin from the lotus feet of the Lord and progress to his smiling face. The meditation should be concentrated upon the lotus feet, then the calves, then the thighs, and in this way higher and higher. The more the mind becomes fixed upon the different parts of the limbs, one after another, the more the intelligence becomes purified. Okay, who wants to go ahead with the purport for us? Yeah.
Process of meditation recommended in the Srimad Bhagavatam is not to fix one's attention on something impersonal or void. The meditation should concentrate on the person of the Supreme Godhead, either in his Virat Rupa, the gigantic universal form, or in his Sachidananda Vigraha, as described in the scriptures. There are authorized descriptions of Vishnu forms, and there are authorized representations of deities in the temples. Thus, one can practice meditating on the deity, concentrating his mind on the lotus feet of the Lord and gradually rising higher and higher up to his smiling face. According to the Bhagavad school, the Lord's rasa dance is the smiling face of the Lord. Since it is recommended in this verse that one should gradually progress from the lotus feet up to the smiling face, we shall not jump at once to understanding the Lord's pastimes in the rasa dance. It is better to practice concentrating our attention by offering flowers and tulsi to the lotus feet of the Lord. In this way, we gradually become purified by the archana process. We dress the Lord, bathe him, etc. And all these transcendental activities help us purify our existence. When we reach the higher standard of purification, if we see the smiling face of the Lord or hear the rasa dance pastimes of the Lord, then we can relish his activities. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, therefore, the rasa dance pastimes are delineated in the 10th canto, chapters 29 to 34. The more one concentrates on the transcendental form of the Lord, either on the lotus feet, the calves, the thighs, or the chest, the more one becomes purified. In this verse, it is clearly stated, the more the intelligence becomes purified, which means the more one becomes detached from sense gratification. Our intelligence is the present conditioned state of life is impure due to being engaged in sense gratification. The result of meditation on the transcendental form of the Lord will be manifested by one's detachment from sense gratification. Therefore, the ultimate purpose of meditation is purification of one's intelligence. Those who are too engrossed in sense gratification cannot be allowed to participate in archana or to touch the transcendental form of the Radha Krishna or Vishnu deities. For them, it is better to meditate upon the gigantic Virat-rupa of the Lord, as recommended in the next verse. The impersonalists and the voidists are therefore recommended to meditate upon the universal form of the Lord, whereas the devotees are recommended to meditate on the deity worship in the temple. Because the impersonalists and the voidists are not sufficiently purified in their spiritual activities, archana is not meant for them.
Thank you. Yeah. What a great purport. Okay, so on this topic of going from the feet upwards, let's hear from Chris Prabhu.
I was very interested in this purport because this idea of making progressive advancement and moving forward in a conscious and deliberate way was very interesting to me and something I've been thinking about for a while. The idea that came to mind when I read this is this idea of like taking small baby steps in spirituality, which is actually a concept that came from a Bill Murray movie that probably none of you have seen because it came out before you were born, called What About Bob? Anyway, there's a whole thing about taking baby steps and how that's how you make progress in a given situation. I think that the purport in this verse really zeroes in on that type of thing. You know, where do you start? How do you move forward? Should you take big jumps forward? What are the dangers there? Those kinds of things. So I noticed one thing in reading this verse and the purport is that the last sentence of the translation almost makes the causality seem different than I would think of it, which is that the more the mind becomes fixed upon different parts of the limbs, one after the other, the more the intelligence becomes purified. So that kind of sounds like the more you concentrate on the limbs and the higher up you go, the more you're purifying it, your intelligence and your consciousness. But I think in a way, really you need to purify your intelligence and consciousness to qualify to move up farther. It reminded me of this joke that I will tell. This comedian Bill Hicks had a bit about how on the news you would hear stories about people doing LSD and then thinking that they could fly and jumping out of buildings and dying. I swear this is a joke. He said, what a jerk. Why didn't they try flying from the ground first? You don't see ducks on in elevators to migrate south. They take off from the ground. I thought that was a really good point. Like, why would you try to jump off a building if you thought you could fly, if you could just, maybe off the porch or just off the ground first? So what does that mean for our spiritual lives? What does it mean to, take off from the ground versus trying to jump off of a building? I think that there's a certain attractiveness to these grand gestures of like skipping some levels and, discovering that you're capable of really advanced devotion, which we all are, certainly. But you kind of have to move through the stages and not skip ahead too far, because I think that's rooted in a lot of ego and pride. And what we want to cultivate more is a mood of humility. And I think that that's a large part of why we talk about worshiping the lotus feet. I'm curious, when you hear worshiping the lotus feet, like what does that mean to you? Does anybody have any thoughts on that they would share? I mean, it's a kind of saying that we hear all the time and we say it all the time, but like, what does that mean? Why are we worshiping the lotus feet? Vaninath?
I'll just add something to your question, just like we just, in Guru Puja, the lotus feet of the spiritual master are the only way by which we can make spiritual advancement. So I'm just expanding your question even still wider, because we speak of lotus feet in a number of different contexts.
Yes. Yes, Max, you got a point?
There's a book called Siddhartha, where in part of the story, when he comes out of the forest and he comes to the city, he passes by a beautiful woman, and he's used to just looking at the ground when he passes by a woman, but for whatever reason, this woman attracted him. But the point is that he would always look down at the women's feet. He wouldn't look up at their face, he'd stay at their feet. So it's kind of like a form of respect, that it's like, if I'm staying beneath their feet, then I'm putting them above me, because they're more advanced. So it's a sign of respect to be like, oh, I'm lower than the feet of this person. It's the lowest part of their body.
That's good. Nitai, and then Jonathan.
Bruce.
I wanted to appreciate what Max said. Like sometimes when there's someone very senior to you, you don't make just in India I've heard that you don't make direct eye contact with them. Like you speak, like offering, like looking at looking at their feet. It's a sign of respect. Also, when we're talking about the lotus feet of the Lord, worshiping, what that means, what I've heard is lotus feet is where the devotees of the Lord reside. And so what it means to worship the lotus feet of the Lord is to render service to the devotees. And what Vaninath Prabhu was saying, like, what does it mean to worship the lotus feet of the spiritual master? The spiritual master's disciples or his servant also reside, like symbolically reside at his lotus feet. So it means becoming servant of the servant of the servant. In that mood, like, you can worship the Supreme Personality of God.
Thank you. Jonathan, you have
I've actually been contemplating on what that means a lot, and my 3 comments. Number one, that talk sometimes like in Christianity about like the right hand of God, and that's symbolic, and just kind of knowing that everything of the Lord has power. So like even his feet have a power, and feet have like a calming effect. Like if somebody puts their foot like on your head, I don't know if anybody's experienced it, just like, okay. And it said like Nrsimhadeva's foot is actually on top of Ganesh's head, and that's one of the reasons he's the remover of obstacles. I think the Lord's lotus feet, recently, I kind of almost internalized it just like in an unexplainable way. Like during Kirtan, I was like, yeah, his feet, man, and it's like kind of unexplainable. And then the other thing I was thinking of is like they're symbolic for walking the path, like we walk next to the Lord.
Something I always thought about the lotus feet. I would wonder about it. I'd be like, why the feet? And then I thought to myself, maybe it's just to cultivate a mood of humility and humbleness.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone's thoughts. Rasika, do you have a quick point?
Also, normally, for most human beings, the feet is kind of like one of the most unclean places. We usually have to wash our feet before we come into the temple room or go on to the altar if we've been outside. Of course, we wear shoes here, so it's not as crucial, but the feet are dirty normally. But we worship the Lord's lotus feet. We worship the lotus feet of Prabhupada and of Guru. And this shows that there's no part of them that is tainted with any material inebriety. And the other thing is it's a sign of both the service attitude, but also taking shelter. So we're coming underneath, not in just the sense of servile attitude, but actually taking shelter. In fact, I think that taking shelter of the lotus feet is spoken of more frequently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Christina, do you have a quick point?
I think feet are incredible marvels of engineering. We don't really appreciate that, but it's definitely something to consider. The hands get all the glory, but feet are amazing.
Yes. Okay.
You said that talking about feet, that implies that the Lord has a form.
Sure. Yeah, I think you guys all touched on all of the points that I was hoping to get to. So we're done. We can go eat now. No. Yeah, I think humility was the one that I was zeroing in on, which Bruce mentioned and Max talked about too. But it kind of means, we think that the best of ourselves is lower than the lowest of the person we're worshiping, because feet are viewed as the lower, unclean things. So it means that we're humble and we're ready to learn. And this led me to thinking about an analogy of something that you take small steps in to advance in, which is weightlifting. I'm thinking about barbell training, where you're training to get stronger. I don't know if anyone has done that kind of training here before, but the overall principle is that when you're lifting these weights, you need to add a little bit weight every time that you're doing it. And, barbell weights come in these 45-pound plates that are huge and weigh 45 pounds, but they also come in 1 pound weights that people use to just progressively increase every time they're doing something. And so when you start lifting weights and trying to get stronger, you have to start pretty small or you're going to hurt yourself. There's, if you do a lot of weight, it can hurt you pretty bad, depending on what you're doing, especially when you're doing squats or compound lifts, where you can really hurt your back. You have to start out small and you have to progress a lot. And even if you can lift a certain weight when you start out, doing it 30 times in one day might cause you great pain a couple of days later. So you have to be patient. You have to start small and you have to add a little bit every time. And I think that this is an important analogy for spiritual life as well. We have to be patient. We have to start where we're supposed to start, and not everybody starts at the same point, especially if you're thinking about progress that you've made in past lives or getting to the point where you're at now. There's a starting point that everybody starts at, and all of these are very individual to different people. And sometimes the starting point might seem like a big jump. A lot of you have made big jumps. Probably moving into an ashram was a huge jump in your spiritual life for you. But once you start and get settled, you kind of need to make progress, and you need to do it in a way that's natural and takes into account your own personality, your own individual needs, and what's the phrase Rasika uses? Psycho-physical nature.
Makeup.
Yeah. So, in spiritual life, we start with a seed of faith, the Shraddha, and even if that's faith that just this process is worth investigating, that's a type of faith. And then we try the process, we see how it works for us, we gain some confidence, we start surrendering to Krishna in little bits, we see how that goes, we build our faith, we build our confidence, we build our knowledge. But we don't try to imitate great devotees. There's a lot of talk about imitation versus following in the footsteps. And imitation is a way that you might be jumping ahead too far. You might see, this devotee does this type of thing. These advanced devotees do that. I'm going to do that. And that's not great. That's something that can actually injure our spiritual lives. We need to follow in the footsteps, and that means, starting and moving forward step by step. And I think that one way that we can measure this progress and see this progress happening is the removal of anarthas. The process of anartha nivriti is a good measure of our progress of meditating upon lotus feet of the Lord. So as you're progressing, you will see these anarthas removed from your life. Some of you have probably seen this already. I've certainly seen this in my life. And it's a good indicator of how you're doing and where you're moving. How are we doing on time? So the verse right before this verse talks a lot about sex desire being the biggest anartha, and how that's something that we need to take care of before diving into the higher cantos. And that's why it's recommended in that verse that if you're still under the sway of sex desire, that focusing on the cantos 1 and 2 are very important. You don't want to move. It's not that you can't read the other cantos or think about them, or like you should stop coming to Bhagavatam class because we're on the 9th canto and I'm not there yet. But that the first 2 cantos are really important to you. That's where your foundation is going to be built. So yeah, one should not try to go. This is from the purport of the verse prior. One should not try to go upwards artificially without seeing for himself how much he has been released from sex desire. And as a person feels his hunger satisfied after eating each morsel of foodstuff, he must similarly be able to see the degree to which he has been freed from sex desire. So these things are good indicators of where our spiritual progress is. And another thing I think we need to keep in mind is that we need to be patient, and we might want to jump forward, but at the same time, we're doing bhakti yoga, and this is a very, very quick process compared to all of the other yoga processes and all the other ways to achieve God realization. So it may seem like you want to jump forward and like patience is hard, and why is this taking so long? And oh my gosh, this is just awful. Not awful. I should take that back. but we're doing bhakti yoga. It moves pretty quickly. It moves very quickly. So that's something to keep in mind. And I think one of the most important things to keep in mind with any endeavor here is that you need to keep persevering. Perseverance is really important. So in the weightlifting analogy, if you miss a day, you shouldn't just be like, oh, this is awful, I'm not doing it anymore. You just come back the next day or the next time you have a scheduled workout and you do it. So in spiritual life, similarly, if you misstep or fall back, you need to keep moving forward. You need to keep chanting. And I see an analog between this kind of thinking about our spiritual life and how to get back to it if we get off of it, and what we do when we're chanting japa every day. I'm sure we've all noticed our mind wandering during japa, and this happens even when you're doing any kind of meditation. And what do? You notice that your mind is wandered and you bring it back to what you're supposed to be concentrating on, which is your japa, which is the holy names of the Lord. So in the same way with our spiritual lives, when you realize you've fallen a little bit or backtracked, it's not that you should be lamenting that and stopping, and you should really just bring yourself back to your practice, back to your chanting, and continue on. The important thing is to keep continuing on to do your daily practice, and to just keep doing that in all circumstances. That's the most important thing. That's why you want to not jump ahead too far, because you want to do something that's sustainable every day. That's the really important part, is a sustainable practice that you can count on and can be the sort of bedrock of your spiritual life.
There's a few more points, but I don't know if we should go to questions. Oh Lord. Maybe I can make one quick point. Ultimately, I think it's important that we all really meditate on how much we are carried by mercy. And if I can use a little analogy, imagine there's someone that climbs into a sports car, but he's climbing into a very modern one. I don't know everything about these modern sports cars, but I know that there's a lot of technology that helps the driver. There's like traction control and assisted steering, and it's automatic shifting. It used to be that someone manually shifting can actually go faster than someone in an automatic car, but nowadays the car's computer can shift so fast with automatic. So basically someone's driving in a modern sports car and they're just like going through the course, but you put that same person in like a sports car from the 70s, 80s, early 90s, they're just going to crash and burn, basically. They're not going to even be able to go through the course. So we should think about our spiritual lives in the same way, and we should realize everything that's been given here Prabhupada has created a house in which the whole world can live, and he's created a society where we have each other's association. Prabhupada's disciples are working really hard, giving us everything they have. So when we can come to that realization, how much we're carried by mercy, then it's easier to just be humble and to just, as Chris is saying, just work on it day by day. Instead of thinking that, oh, look at me, I've become so advanced. Let me be a Rasik Vaishnava and just, read 10th canto, read the Rasa dance, and I'll go chant in my room because I'm so advanced. I won't really, those devotees are beneath me. I hope we never come to that mentality and we realize that, Prabhupada, he's given us the highest thing, but we should have faith in the process and that it'll bring us there in due time. There's no reason to rush. Okay.
Can I add one quick point to that? One thing I read last night that I really liked was this idea that mercy flows like water. Water flows downhill, and that humility and humbleness make you the lowest point, and therefore that's kind of where the mercy flows.
Yeah. And they say the snakes drown first. Snakes are slithering on the ground. When there's a flood and a lot of rain, the snakes drown first. Some of our acharyas use that analogy. The snakes are lowest on the ground, So if you're paying dandavats like a snake at all times, then the water will drown you, the mercy will drown you. Yeah.
I thought the same.
Good point. We want to drown in mercy. Yeah. Thanks for clarifying. Okay, so any questions, comments, rectifications? Nice, Prabhu. Okay.
It says you should remember and meditate upon the universal form.
He should remember or meditate upon the universal form of the Lord at the end of his prescribed duties. So what does that mean? Like you finish all your work, you retire, you take Vanaprasth, and then you focus on the universal form?
I guess so. I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, so first of all, it says this is for those who are not yet in a loving mood towards the Lord. They should focus on the universal form. But yes, it says at the end of his prescribed duties. So I guess, in the Vedic system, if you have children and a wife, make sure they're taken care of. And then you can go do your spiritual stuff. I guess you can read it like that.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Other questions and comments?
I just wanted to make a quick comment, and that is that that was excellent, Chris. Very nice. Inspiring.
I guess we had a lot of discussion. Everyone's all discussion done. Okay. So we'll end there. Thank you so much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Enemies of the Lord are released from all kinds of sins because they eat food which is offered first for sacrifice. Others who prepare food